Venom from 2018. Now, I have a region-free edition, which I believe came from Random Space Media. Last time I checked their website, I did not see it listed anymore, so I don't know what's going on with that. There are other countries where you can get the 3D edition from. Now, Venom seems to have been something Sony was convinced would be huge, but unless my perspective is off, I feel it really hasn't. This one will soon be a trilogy, so they kept making sequels, but I get the feeling it's thought of as being more along the lines of acceptably okay rather than an amazing juggernaut entry into the Spider-Man world. 3D-wise, though, I think it's a solid conversion, though it tends to get lost in the dark. The 3D is at a disadvantage because the bigger sequences, the fight sequences, tend to play out at night. And as such, the stereo tends not to get noticed during these more exciting parts of the movie. As consequence, it's easy to walk away from this and feel like the 3D didn't do very much, when in reality it's usually actually quite good when you can see it. Notice here how well these trees are separated while he has his jog through the woods. And also you'll find details inside the offices and laboratory rooms are quite good. Notice the dust on the windows, and there's lots of detail in here. That's quite a lot of fun to see. Curiously, though, whenever our symbiote friend shows up, the details on his skin don't always feel genuine, like they've been smoothed over somehow. We still get some nice toothy shots, which is what I showed up to see, and the stereo does a good job of making these fangs look sharp and menacing. Also, we do get some pleasant, shall we say, spaghetti moments, though, again, it's often marred by a dark background that tended to blend into the details of the Venom figure. He's black, Night is black. It just makes it all a little less satisfying than I'd hoped for. I'm not sure how that could have been compensated for. Would making the separation more extreme have helped it? Or I don't know. There are a few momentary shots where Venom is a little more than a cutout, but so far as I could tell, these seem to be kept to split-second cutaways in the midst of the more intense action, and I don't think anyone would really notice unless they're picking through the movie frame by frame. Perhaps the biggest issue with Venom is he is a very dynamic animation with lots of threatening parts that I just naturally expected would come right at me. But the movie just is not made with 3D in mind, so despite the potential, we never get things stabbed out of the screen or splattered at us. There is just no pop. It's like looking into a fish tank. Still very 3D, but it stops at the glass. And notice here that reflection isn't quite what it should be. Still, I am always impressed that they are able to manipulate reflections at all. One of those things that seems it just shouldn't be possible to do. Here is a fun mirror shot. My only complaint is this mirror seems a bit too clean. When there are mirrors in conversion, I always like to see the sprinkling of dust that they've otherwise gotten really good at preserving. Story-wise, this movie is surprisingly dry. It seemed to have everything I'd expect from a comic book action movie, and I really wasn't sure why it felt sluggish. My best guess, after some consideration, is I believe the lead character, Brock, might have been written with a different look in mind that caused some of the mood, especially the comic relief, to fall flat. And maybe I'll dwell on that and explain it a little bit. There's, well, let's call it a visual language, an unspoken visual language to film. Certain things just communicate on sight. Give a guy horns and red eyes, he is going to be evil, which can really only be contradicted if you make that contradiction a significant focus of the movie. Another example is if someone gets hit, perhaps by a car, or just punched or whacked with a bat, you really feel it, and it's bad. Unless they're fat, then it's funny. It may not be right, but visuals don't play by rules. They just are. Another example, an old example, might be Charles Bukowski's complaint about the adaptation of his book Barfly, as the book, like all of his books, was written from the perspective of the ugly and self-hating. But they cast the then young, handsome, and beaming Mickey Rourke. And it felt like the story of someone visiting a cage rather than born into one, which created a very different mood. The jokes and irony just wasn't the same. And with Venom, I think this movie was written for someone who looks like Peter Parker, a too skinny guy who gets blown over by the wind. The thing is, Brock just looks like someone who can take it on the chin, isn't afraid to get dirty, and doesn't embarrass easy. So what if he jumps in the restaurant tank? He looks like he'd do that on a $5 bet. The neighbor is too loud. Brock already looks like a guy who could hurt him. It already feels like the neighbor is taking a risk by imposing on him. And Venom isn't changing my perception of who this guy is or what he's capable of. So when he discovers Venom and we get this living in a new world sequence, it just feels like we're sitting through a day in the life, and it just isn't very interesting. Still, all that is really just exposition problems. Once things get hooked up, plugged in, and going, the dual personality between Brock and Venom does become fairly entertaining, like old bickering brothers, reminding us all that everyone can use a friend.